What's up everybody, I'm Chris, and this is 8-Bit Guitarist. On the very first episode, I'm going to talk to you guys about open source music software, and make some recommendations for some free music utilities you guys might find useful. Let's jump right in. Open source software is software that's designed for the user to make and change as they see fit. It's usually community built and driven, and often is free. And that's what's nice, you don't have a big corporation forcing updates or forcing features that you don't really need or want. This is designed by the users for the users. You're a musician, not a programmer, why do you care? Well, like I said, it's free. And there's a lot of great utilities out there that you can start to build your own home studio, do recordings, make great music, and you can do it on a budget. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but there's a lot of software out there for making music that's a bit on the pricey side. I don't know about you guys, but I don't have thousands of dollars to drop every time a new version of Pro Tools comes out. Or even Finale or some of the more budget-friendly software like Cubase. I won't even get started on this video about the fact that there's basically one major company that's trying to call the shots on a lot of the creative arts industry. And I'm not calling them out. They make a good product that just works 99% of the time. I know a lot of you are in the same boat as me. Because of my day job and some of my other hobbies, I have to have a Windows or Linux machine. I have to have a PC of some sort. Maybe you're a developer. Maybe you're a Windows developer. Maybe you have some specific CAD software that only works on Windows. Maybe you're doing data science and you have to have an Ubuntu machine that only runs programs very specific to your job, and you also happen to use that PC as your daily driver and are thinking about recording or making music with it. That's a lot of the type of stuff we're going to talk about. I will be covering Apple products as well. I'm just between iPads right now. Let's start with the big thing, DAWs and recording. Right out of the gate, we can't not talk about Audacity. It's not quite a full DAW, but it sure does the job for a lot of small-time recordings, and especially if you're just trying to get audio straight into your machine. Guess what? That's what you're hearing now. A blue Snowball Ice hooked up by USB, back of my PC, running Audacity. Later it'll be mixed into video with Kdenlive, which is actually open source video processing. Now if you do download any of these tools, a lot of them only run on donations, and that's what keeps a lot of these guys alive. So don't be afraid to throw $1 here or there. I know I do every time I download Ardor, which is our next topic. If you need a full DAW, that's your ticket for free. I think a lot of people tend to opt for Reaper since that's usually the full-featured budget option. Reaper does run on Linux, Mac, and Windows, I believe. As does Ardor. I keep hearing in the forums that Ardor is a little more difficult to use. I don't think so. I was trained in Pro Tools through college, and the switch to Ardor was pretty fluid for me. The other thing I have read is the use of VSTs in Ardor is a little rough, or it just straight doesn't support a lot of the virtual instruments that you might want to use. So if you're using an Apple product, Ardor is probably not the product for you. For the rest of us, it's a full-featured workstation. It has MIDI inputs. There's no limit to the number of inputs. And honestly, I think it just looks good. If you're switching over from Pro Tools, this is a great option. Now, I'll be honest, because I am trained in Pro Tools, I like to use both. I'm only using Pro Tools First right now, and I can use that for a little bit of mastering, just only because I'm familiar with it. Ardor is better as a full-featured workstation. I do a lot of composing in notation software, and importing MIDI into Ardor is pretty easy. And then you can run your outs to virtual instruments from there. And that's a good segue into the next topic, notation software. I know this is something that probably a lot of you guys don't use, especially if you're not up on theory or if you don't have any interest in notating any of your music into a PC. It's a big world to get into. As a guitar player, I do highly recommend that you guys check out Tux Guitar. It's a very simple utility and very reminiscent of both PowerTab Editor, which was released in the early 2000s, I believe. This one is still managed. It has a very clean user interface, which is the most important thing for me on notation software. And you can input relatively quickly compared to a lot of other softwares on the market. Now, I know that there's a major guitar tablature software out there that everybody uses, but if I remember correctly, that runs around $60. Tux Guitar is free, completely free, and available on multiple platforms. I will be doing an episode later on guitar tablature editing software and a couple reviews, so stay tuned for those. For full featured notation, MuseScore, has been the go-to recently for free open source music notation software. I honestly believe the user interface is a bit easier to use than Sibelius, though it does not integrate as easy in Pro Tools. It doesn't include a very good set of virtual instruments, but you can add them in if you feel so inclined. Another big open source notation editor, and I know this is more than just a notation editor that everyone should go check out right away, is Rose Garden. It's got all sorts of features that lets you do anything from notation to recording, I believe. It's basically a workstation, but I've not used it in that capacity. And for those of you that have some familiarity with this whole open source thing, I know you're waiting for me to talk about this, and I'm only going to mention it briefly for now because we're going to take a deep dive into it later. Ubuntu Studio. If you are only ever using your PC for any sort of video editing, audio editing, graphic design, anything else, it's a fully featured, open source, free operating system that will replace Windows. It's got a lot of great utilities. In my experience, it works 99% out of the box with very little configuration. I have had some problems with MIDI on it in the past, but that's been several years ago. That'll come at a later episode because I can talk about each one of those individual utilities included in Ubuntu Studio for hours. Now, if you have no experience with any Linux distribution, it's a little rough to get into at first. Now, I'm giving you guys these recommendations so that way you can start to put together the software needed for a fully functional home studio. It might not be the fanciest system, but it will get the job done. And a lot of these utilities I like better than the alternate professional products that you find on the market. Well, that just about wraps up everything I have for this video. I will be including some honorable mentions that'll roll right after this. I'm also including download links for all the software that we've talked about in the description below. Do me a favor, leave me a comment with your favorite piece of open source software or your favorite free music utility. There's plenty out there I haven't heard about. I'm sure there's a lot out there that everybody else would be interested in hearing about as well. If you like this video, as always, be sure to like and subscribe. I'm Chris, signing out. Remember, stay connected, stay creative.